All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to break down a single policy, just one rule, that completely redrew the map of India. And get this, it also lit the fuse for one of the biggest rebellions in its history. Yep, we are talking about the Doctrine of Lapse.
So, here's the big question we're going to be tackling. How on earth did a seemingly dry rule about royal succession somehow spark the massive 1857 rebellion? It sounds kind of wild when you put it like that, doesn't it? Let's figure it out.
Okay, here's our game plan. We'll start with why the British felt they even needed this doctrine. Then, we'll look at how it was created and, more importantly, how it actually worked. From there, we'll see which states got caught in its web, and finally, we'll cover the explosive rebellion and its aftermath. First things first, we've got to set the stage. What was going on with the East India Company back in the mid-19th century? What problem were they facing that pushed them to create such a radical policy? Well, it really all boiled down to two things: power and money. The East India Company, they were in a tough spot financially. So their goals were pretty clear: lock down their political control, grab more land, and get more cash flowing in. But just marching in and conquering everyone was getting messy. They needed a smarter way, something that looked official, almost legal, to just absorb the princely states that were still standing. And this is what they came up with: a policy that, on the surface, looked like a rule of law. But in reality, it was a political weapon, one that was cleverly designed to turn Indian traditions against the Indian rulers themselves. And here is the rule itself. It's brutally simple. The British just declared themselves the paramount power in India, which basically gave them the ultimate say on who could be a ruler. So under this new doctrine, if a king died without a natural-born son, his kingdom didn't go to an adopted heir. Nope. It would simply lapse, or revert, straight back to the British. Just like that. Now, this idea wasn't entirely new. It had been kind of floating around. But it was Governor-General Lord Dalhousie who really turned it into a weapon after 1848. He took this policy and just went for it. He applied it with relentless aggression, transforming it into the main engine for British expansion, right up until the rebellion forced them to scrap it. So, how did this policy actually play out on the ground? Let's dig into the nitty-gritty. Because for anyone trying to really analyze this period, understanding these mechanics is absolutely crucial. This right here, this gets to the very heart of the conflict. You see, for centuries, Indian rulers had adopted sons to continue their family line. It was a sacred, perfectly valid custom. The Doctrine of Lapse just steamrolled right over that. It basically said, sure, an adopted son can inherit his father's personal property, but his kingdom, the throne, no way. That's ours now. And these features all worked together to make it an airtight system. They refused to recognize adopted heirs, stripped them of titles and pensions, and even had a backup plan, the misgovernance clause. So if the doctrine didn't apply, they could just say a state was being poorly run and take it over anyway. And the wildest part? They tried to justify all this by falsely claiming it was based on Hindu law. And believe me, this wasn't just some theory being debated in London. This doctrine had devastating real-world consequences for a whole lot of princely states all across India. Under Dalhousie, the pace was just relentless. The dominoes started to fall, with Satara in 1848. Then came others like Jhansi and the huge state of Nagpur. But the final straw for many was the annexation of Awadh in 1856. And they didn't even use the doctrine for that one, just the pretext of misgovernance. You can imagine the wave of fear and anger this sent through the remaining kingdom. So what happens when you push that hard? What was the ultimate consequence of this incredibly aggressive policy? Well, this is where all the pieces of the puzzle click into place, linking the doctrine directly to the end of company rule in India. So yeah, the British definitely achieved their goal of expanding their territory, but you can see the enormous cost. The policy didn't just chip away at sovereignty and tradition, it was literally pouring fuel on a fire. It became one of the key grievances that exploded into the Indian Rebellion of 1857. You can see the chain reaction so clearly here. The resentment from the annexations directly fueled the 1857 rebellion. That rebellion, in turn, led to the end of the East India Company's rule. The British Crown then had to step in and take direct control. And in a final, great irony, the Doctrine of Lapse, the policy that caused all the trouble, was officially abandoned. Its own success was its undoing. That rebellion was a massive wake-up call for the British. They suddenly realized that constant annexation was just unsustainable and, frankly, dangerous. So, to secure their empire, they did a complete 180. They shifted their strategy, ditched the Doctrine of Lapse, and started promising to respect the rights and dignities of the Indian princes who were left.
So, at the end of the day, we're left with this critical question. Was the Doctrine of Lapse a calculated masterstroke of imperial strategy that just went a little too far? Or was it a fatal miscalculation, born from a complete and total ignorance of the cultural and political realities of India? That debate is really the key to understanding this entire pivotal moment in history.